Welcome to Fulbourn Fen. This is a nature reserve south of Cambridge, near the suburb of Fulbourn. A mixed nature reserve of woodland, dry grassland meadow and a wet grassland meadow, and it's the wet grassland meadow we're heading for, and it's a very special site. Easily the biggest, most densely populated marsh orchid site that I've seen anywhere in the country. There are hundreds of marsh orchids there. You've got, if you're lucky, bee orchids as well, common spotted, common twayblade, a mixed bag, but it's the marsh orchids that make this place absolutely special, and you'll be in for a treat with this one. I'll be looking for some variations, maybe some hybrids and whatever, but it's just a fantastic collection of marsh orchids, and always look forward to coming here. Fulbourn Fen, just south of Cambridge. This area behind me is the what's known as the dry meadow. It's a classic flower meadow, hay meadow, call it what you will. It looks perfect for orchids, but I've walked around here for a significant amount of time in the past, and there's no orchids here as such, or very few if there are. I've not seen any, so yeah, it's still a beautiful spot. Okay, here we are in the damp, wet, whatever you want to call it, meadow at Fulbourn Fen. As I say, magnificent site for marsh orchids, early marsh orchids, southern marsh orchids, and a few other bonuses thrown in too. There's a history to this site. It used to have a manor house in the middle of it about 500, 600, 700 years ago, and that manor house had a moat around it, and although the house has gone, the moat and the remnants of the moat is still here. And that's what keeps it pretty much what it is in terms of being a damp meadow. So yeah, very well looked after, well grazed to keep the more invasive species out, and yeah, a cracking site. We should be in for a treat or two, or dozens even. That's a pair of the classic resident southern marsh orchids. We'll be seeing plenty of those. I hope you can just about make out the sort of density of the marsh orchids here is truly phenomenal. You get odd ones and twos at sites around Peterborough of these, but they are just absolutely everywhere on this site. It's really setting the scenes on this one, having seen the southern marsh orchids. Here's the other classic marsh orchid, the early marsh orchid, that is here in absolute huge numbers, but there are some lovely variations of this one, and you don't get many variations of the early marsh, but around here there's some very special ones which I'll show you in a second. Okay, well here's the special variation of the early marsh orchid. It's the pure white form. Orchid Bibles describe this as a very rare plant, and I've seen one of these before. The amazing thing on this side is I'm sitting at the moment in amongst the patch where there must be 5 or 6 of these in close proximity, and that's pretty outstanding going. But it's a stunning plant, the white form of the early marsh orchid, and to see a whole group of them around me is amazing, and I've certainly never seen that before. There's another one, strong plant. And another one. Early marsh orchid, nothing particularly special about this apart from it's got a lovely pink hue to it. I think it's just the younger flowers at the top, but it's kind of more pink than salmon, this one. It's a really nice flower. Nice little group of common twayblade here. There are a tremendous amount of common twayblades in this field. One of the fun elements of this orchid field is that the common spotted orchids look very, very similar to the southern marsh orchids, and they can hybridize. So you really got to look at every single plant to try and work out which it is. These are all common spotted orchids. In the background there is a southern marsh orchid, but these are common spotted simply because, well, I think the flowers are distinctly common spotted, but the leaves have spots on them, so they're definitely common spotted, although some might suggest there's a hint of southern marsh orchid in them, but I'd just say these are common spotted orchids. Whereas that is a southern marsh orchid. Now this is when it gets fun. This is a probably larger than average plant in the middle of the field, and on the face of it, it looks like a southern marsh orchid, but it also looks like a common spotted orchid. And the colouring, the shape of the flower head, I think it's possibly a hybrid. There are definitely markings on the leaves, so there's definitely common spotted in there. But that colouring and that pattern on the leaves, definite hint of southern marsh. That could be a hybrid. There's a few of these dotted around the field. It's definitely a southern marsh orchid, but it's definitely a much paler form of colour, and I just haven't seen these pictured before anywhere on the various Facebook groups. It's definitely a southern marsh orchid, but that colouring makes me wonder whether something has had an influence over it. But yeah, it's a nice form. I like this one. That's a bit of a clonker of a southern marsh orchid on the right there. That's over 12 inches tall. Stands out from the crowd. You tend to find hybrids grow larger than the parent plants in most cases. It's usually a good sign of hybridization, but this is a pure southern marsh orchid, and a very nice one too. Being a damper meadow rather than a dry meadow, it's not really the domain for bee orchids, but there are a few bee orchids dotted around this field, like this one. I've been given a tip off by a young lady on the way into the reserve that there are more bee orchids in the next field to me, which I've never been in, so I'll be trekking over there shortly to have a look at those. Can't give up that opportunity, but there are bee orchids in this wetter meadow if you seek them out. Okay, well, this was one of the plants I've been looking for here. Now this, on the face of it, looks like a common spotted orchid. It looks a bit like a southern marsh orchid, but it is a hybrid, and there's no doubt about this one, because the flowers look very distinctly common spotted to me, but there are no spots on the leaves at all. The stem is hollow, which is another telltale sign of a marsh orchid, and I would say this is at least 90% definitely a hybrid between the common spotted orchid and the southern marsh orchid. And it may well be all of these pale forms of southern marsh orchid are actually hybrids. I'm absolutely positive this one is. There's 2 or 3 more around me as well, so yeah, it all makes sense. I'm going to chalk this one up as a hybrid. Okay, well, I'm dragging myself away from the wet meadow. Local knowledge is always king, and local knowledge passed on to me this morning is that there are bee orchids aplenty in the next field, which I've never been in, so curiosity's getting the better of me, and I'm going to go and see what's what. Can't resist a bee orchid. What was I saying about local knowledge is king? I've walked through the field. I haven't seen a bee orchid. Well, I have. I've seen one. It's down by my feet, which I'll show you in a second, but they've got to be here. I'm going to have to wander off this beaten track, and they tend to colonise locally, so if you can find one, they usually group around, so I'm just going to have to work a bit harder, but yeah, they're certainly not all over the place as I might have hoped for, but I'll show you the one I've got. You've got to have good eyes to spot these things. Well, I can see two now. I was right about them grouping together. There's one down here as well. Whoops. There's the second one nearby. Sticking in this corner at the moment because having seen two, like I say, there's usually more, so this is a third one in the corner with 2 flowers on this one and 3 flowers on it, sorry, and about 3 more in buds. This will be a lovely plant when it's fully open. We have the full set really here of the Fulbourn Fen orchids, with the exception of the bee orchid, I suppose. Southern Marsh Orchid, early Marsh Orchid, common spotted orchid, and as a real bonus, this one. Now, again, screams out common spotted orchid. The shape of the flower is common spotted orchid. The pattern on the leaves is more Southern Marsh Orchid. Pattern on the flowers, sorry. There is no pattern on the leaves. It's plain. It's definitely got Southern Marsh Orchid in it, but that flower shape doesn't look right. I would suggest that's probably a hybrid. A wonderfully intense coloured Southern Marsh Orchid. I spotted this one from some distance. It stands out from the crowd. It's a lovely colour. Well, there you go, that's it. That's Fulbourn Fen. I could spend a lot longer here, but it's an absolutely cracking site, and if you love your orchids and you're over this way, then check out Fulbourn Fen Nature Reserve. You can find all about it, including directions, on the internet. It's a recognised and well looked after nature reserve, and as I say, it's well worth the trip to come down during the month of June to see these marsh orchids in the wet meadow here. Absolutely fantastic site.